The ground beneath your feet is not always a place of peace. Some of humanity's greatest cities were built directly upon the most dangerous real estate on Earth. This is the enduring mystery of ancient urban planning. Why would our ancestors choose to establish their capitals and sacred centers along active fault lines and in the shadows of volcanoes? By the end of our journey, you will possess a new framework for understanding history, seeing the ancient world as a daring negotiation with the planet's raw power. We will uncover why a trembling Earth was not a deterrent, but a powerful magnet, drawing civilizations toward it for reasons of defense, wealth, and even communion with the gods. What hidden logic made the slopes of a volcano more desirable than a quiet, stable plain? How did the constant threat of annihilation forge not just buildings, but unbreakable cultures? This exploration will permanently alter how you see the ruins of the past and the cities of the present. What does it truly mean to build a home on the edge? A sudden tremor shakes the world without warning. The solid earth becomes liquid, swallowing homes and trees. A distant mountain explodes, painting the sky with fire and cloaking the sun in ash for months. For our ancestors, these were not mere natural disasters. They were the most profound and terrifying conversations the planet could have. In a world without science to explain plate tectonics or magma chambers, there was only one possible interpretation. This was the work of gods. The ground did not just crack, it spoke. The mountain did not just erupt, it breathed divine fire. This primal experience forms the very bedrock of our mystery. Ancient peoples did not merely fear these forces, they revered them. An active fault line was not a flaw in the landscape, it was a sacred seam, a place where the veil between the human world and the realm of the divine was dangerously, wonderfully thin. They believed in the numen, the living spirit of a place, and what place had a more powerful, more audible spirit than one that rumbled and roared? A volcano was not a threat, it was a portal. An earthquake was not a catastrophe, it was a message. To build your city upon such ground was to place yourself at the center of a divine dialogue. You were living in the house of a god, or at the very foot of their throne. This transformed the calculus of survival completely. The risk of annihilation was balanced against the ultimate privilege, direct access to the source of all power and creation. Your temple, built upon the fissure that shook, became the antenna for receiving celestial will. Your priests, interpreting the tremors and the plumes of smoke, became the translators for the gods themselves. This was sacred geography. The most spiritually charged real estate on Earth was, by definition, the most geologically active. So before a single stone was laid for defense, or a single field was planted for its fertile soil, the decision was often made in the realm of faith. To build here was a sacred mandate, an act of devotion so profound it overruled the instinct for simple safety. The community was not just building a settlement, it was anchoring itself to the heartbeat of the divine. This foundation of reverence turns our modern perception on its head. We see risk where they saw opportunity, not for wealth, but for wisdom. We see danger where they saw the dwelling place of destiny itself. This reverence for the sacred earth also delivered a brutally practical gift, the ultimate defensive advantage. When you choose to live upon the restless ground, you are often choosing to live upon terrain sculpted by immense force. The same tectonic collisions that trigger earthquakes also thrust up sheer cliffs and jagged ridges. The volcanic eruptions that bring terror also leave behind steep-sided cones and plateaus surrounded by fields of broken, impassable rock. For an ancient city planner, these were not obstacles, they were pre-built fortifications gifted by the gods themselves. A community could turn the planet's raw power into its own shield. Consider the awe-inspiring Acropolis of Athens. That iconic high ground, the very heart of classical civilization, is a block of limestone thrust upward by tectonic forces along a fault line. It presented a sheer face on three sides, a natural fortress requiring only one wall to be built across its western approach. An attacking army would be forced into a funnel, staring up at an impregnable citadel. They were not just fighting Athenian soldiers, they were fighting the landscape. This principle repeats across the ancient world. The city of Mycenae in Greece, famous for its massive cyclopean walls, sits nestled between two towering ridges. These ridges are direct results of seismic activity, creating a narrow, easily defended pass. A handful of defenders could hold that gateway against an army. In the highlands of Peru, the Inca built Machu Picchu along a geological fault. This provided not only a stable foundation for their breathtaking stonework, but also steep cliffs on three sides that made the city nearly invisible and incredibly difficult to assault. The geological boundary created a natural moat of air. Even the threat of ongoing activity could be a deterrent. An invading force might think twice about camping on ground known to tremble or near a mountain that occasionally coughed ash and fire. The local population, intimately familiar with the signs and safe zones, held a profound home field advantage. Their perceived spiritual alliance with the powerful place was matched by a very real tactical one. They had learned to read the moods of the earth, turning a universal danger into a personalized defense. So the choice was stark: build endless walls on a peaceful plain using backbreaking labor, or let the planet build your walls for you. Ancient leaders were not reckless, they were brilliant strategists. They understood that true security often lies not in avoiding danger, but in mastering it, in positioning yourself where the very forces that could destroy you also make you untouchable. They traded the predictable vulnerability of the open field for the formidable, if perilous, strength of the precipice. This was the first great bargain with the earth, trading the fear of collapse for the power of an unassailable height. But a fortress, no matter how strong, cannot survive on stone alone. A city needs to eat, to drink, to craft, and to trade. This is where the second, perhaps more compelling, bargain with the earth reveals itself. The same geological violence that built defensive cliffs also unlocked a treasure chest of resources directly beneath the streets. An active fault is not just a crack in the ground, it is a pipeline from the planet's interior. Superheated water, rich with dissolved minerals, rises along these fractures, creating hot springs and depositing veins of metal. A volcano is not just a mountain of fire, it is a factory for the very materials that defined ancient civilization. When magma cools, it forms obsidian, a glass so sharp it can be flaked into blades with an edge a single molecule thick. This was the steel of the Stone Age, a material so valuable that trade networks spanned continents to acquire it. The city of Teotihuacan in Mexico, one of the largest in the ancient world, rose to power in part by controlling the massive obsidian deposits at the nearby Pachuca volcano. That black glass was their currency and their weapon, flowing from a geological gift. Beyond obsidian, volcanoes bring sulfur to the surface, a yellow mineral essential for medicine, for preserving food, and for a terrifying early form of chemical warfare. They cough up pumice for building and scouring. Most famously, they bring forth the glittering prizes, gold, silver, and copper, forged in immense heat and pressure deep below, and then delivered upward by tectonic forces. To build on a fault line was to have a direct line to the planet's mineral wealth. Yet the most vital resource of all was not mined but grown. Volcanic soil is a miracle of fertility. Ash from eruptions breaks down into a fine, mineral-rich powder that holds water like a sponge and provides a perfect bed for roots. This soil does not deplete quickly. It constantly renews itself with every minor eruption. The results can be staggering. Consider the doomed city of Pompeii in the centuries before its famous end. It was not a city living in fear, but one thriving in abundance. The slopes of Mount Vesuvius were a patchwork of incredibly productive vineyards and orchards. The wine from Pompeii was famous across the Roman world. The city's wealth, its vibrant art, and its dense population were all fundamentally rooted in the profound richness of the volcanic earth. The same story repeats from the slopes of Mount Etna in Sicily to the highlands of Guatemala. A community could support far more people on far less land, enabling the surplus that fuels art, government, and culture. And then there is water, the ultimate necessity. Fault lines often channel groundwater to the surface, creating reliable, perennial springs. In an arid landscape, a spring emerging from a crack in the rock is not just a water source, it is the reason for existence. The city of Petra, carved into rose-red cliffs, owed its life to a fault-controlled water system that channeled every drop of precious rainfall through a complex network of cisterns and canals. So the survival logic becomes breathtakingly clear. The equation was not about avoiding risk, but about maximizing reward. Ancient planners understood that the forces capable of wiping a city from the map were the very same forces that provided its food, its water, its tools, and its wealth. It was the original high-risk, high-reward investment. You accepted the terrifying possibility of a catastrophic event in exchange for the daily, guaranteed certainty of unparalleled prosperity. The ground did not just defend you, it fed you. It did not just speak of gods, it paid in gold and grain. This was a bargain of staggering ambition, a choice to build a civilization not in spite of the planet's power, but because of it. Yet this pursuit of prosperity always circled back to a single, non-negotiable element: water. In the end, no city, no matter how wealthy or well-defended, could survive without it. And here, the restless Earth offered its most persuasive argument. Active geological boundaries are not just mineral factories or natural fortresses. They are master hydrologists engineering the flow of life itself. A fault line is a crack in the planet's plumbing, a channel that can direct vast reservoirs of underground water toward the surface. Where these fractures meet the land above, they give birth to perennial springs, oases of certainty in an uncertain world. This was often the deciding factor, the final piece of logic that made a dangerous location not just acceptable, but utterly essential. Consider the rose-red city of Petra, carved into the cliffs of southern Jordan. It is a masterpiece of desert survival, and its entire existence was a conversation with a fault line. The city sits within a deep canyon, or sick, which is itself a giant fracture in the sandstone created by tectonic forces. The surrounding cliffs are not just beautiful, they are a vast, angled catchment system. When the rare desert rains fell, every single drop was channeled by the natural geology into this narrow gorge. The Nabateans, Petra's builders, did not fight this system, they became its partners. They constructed an intricate network of dams, cisterns, and ceramic pipes that captured, stored, and directed this fault-guided water. They turned a geological scar into a lifeline, supporting a population of tens of thousands in the heart of a parched landscape. For them, the fault did not represent danger, it represented deliverance. It was the architect of their water supply. Then there is the gift of geothermal water. Where faults run deep, they tap into the Earth's internal heat, bringing warm, mineral-rich water to the surface as hot springs. The ancient city of Hierapolis in Turkey was founded directly atop such a spectacular fault line. The result was the gleaming white terraces of Pamukkale, formed over millennia by the flowing, calcium-laden waters. For the people of Hierapolis, this was more than a water source. It was a place of healing, believed to cure ailments, and a sacred site where the boundary between the earthly and the divine seemed to steam and shimmer. The spring was a hospital, a temple, and the city's central economic engine, all flowing from a crack in the earth. This pattern repeats across the globe. From the thermal baths of Roman Bath in England, fed by a fault-driven aquifer, to the sacred springs that determined the location of oracle sites in Greece, the message is clear. In a world without powered pumps or deep drilling technology, a reliable spring was a miracle. If that miracle emerged from a trembling fault zone, the choice was simple. You built your city around it. The hydrological imperative overruled almost every other concern. A community could import grain, it could trade for obsidian, and it could build walls. But it could not manufacture a perpetual, clean water source from nothing. When one was found, especially in an arid region, you staked your future on it, regardless of the seismic whispers beneath. This underscores a fundamental, humbling truth in the story of human settlement. Our greatest urban centers were often not born from a grand vision of empire, but from a basic, desperate need for a drink. The pursuit of water has always been the primary force guiding our footsteps, and that pursuit led us time and again directly into the arms of the planet's most dynamic and dangerous zones. We followed the water, and the water flowed from the fault. The flow of wealth across the ancient world followed paths carved not by kings, but by the planet itself. A third, equally compelling reason for building on the edge was the control of trade. Geological upheaval does not merely create mountains, it forges the very highways and gateways of commerce. When tectonic plates collide, they do not just produce earthquakes, they sculpt mountain passes, river valleys, and deep coastal inlets. These became the unavoidable funnels for all movement of people, goods, and ideas. To place your city at one of these natural choke points was to hold the key to an empire's treasury. Consider the legendary city of Sardis, capital of the Lydian kingdom in what is now Turkey. It sat strategically within the Hermus River Valley, a fertile corridor defined and shaped by fault lines. This valley was not a random feature, it was the primary east-west highway of its age. The famed Royal Road of the Persian Empire later ran through it, and the lucrative caravans carrying silk, spices, and incense from the east had no choice but to pass by Sardis gates. By controlling this geologically mandated route, the kings of Lydia controlled the taxes and tolls on a river of wealth. They grew so rich they are credited with inventing coinage itself, turning precious metals from nearby mountains into the world's first standardized currency. Their power was not born in a boardroom, but in a river valley forged by seismic force. The same principle applied to the sea. Tectonic activity often drops blocks of land, creating deep, sheltered natural harbors where none existed before. The city of Alexandria Troas in northwest Turkey possessed one such perfect harbor created by seismic subsidence along a fault. This made it a vital port for Roman traffic crossing to and from the province of Asia. Control that harbor and you controlled the maritime link between continents. You could tax every ship, regulate the flow of grain and troops, and become an indispensable hub in a vast network. This transforms our understanding of the geological boundary. It was more than a source of fear or fertility. It was a tool of immense political and economic leverage. A city built upon such a site did not just survive the landscape, it mastered it. It turned the planet's violent sculpting into a system of control, extracting a fee from every merchant, diplomat, and army that nature forced to go through its front door. The trembling earth did not just provide resources, it provided a captive audience for commerce and a geographical monopoly on movement. In a world without airplanes or freeways, controlling the one good pass through the mountains or the one safe harbor on a rocky coast was the ultimate source of power. It was a silent, permanent form of empire, built directly into the bones of the continent. The logic of survival and trade meets a deeper, more profound layer of intention. If you believe the earth is alive with divine energy, then the ultimate act of city building is not just to live upon that energy, but to channel it. This is the realm of sacred geography, where the entire urban landscape becomes a carefully tuned instrument, designed to resonate with the planet's hidden frequencies. Beyond defense, water, and wealth, the most compelling reason to build on a fault line may have been to tap into a source of power that was neither mineral nor martial but spiritual. Ancient planners saw the Earth not as inert matter, but as a living body crisscrossed by energy lines and punctuated by powerful nodes. A fault was not a flaw, it was a ley line of immense potency. A volcano was not a hazard, it was a direct connection to the fiery heart of creation. To align your most sacred structures with these features was to plug your civilization directly into the cosmos. The goal was harmony, a conscious synchronization of human ritual with terrestrial and celestial rhythms. This transforms these ancient cities from collections of buildings into three-dimensional prayers, etched permanently into the landscape. They were acts of what we might call geospiritual engineering. Perhaps the clearest example of this is the legendary Oracle of Delphi in Greece. For centuries, rulers and commoners alike made the arduous journey to this remote mountainside, seeking prophecy from the priestess known as the Pythia. Her cryptic utterances shaped the course of wars, the founding of colonies, and the fate of individuals, but her power did not come from within alone. Modern geological studies have confirmed that the Temple of Apollo at Delphi sits directly atop the intersection of two major fault lines. These fractures in the bedrock allowed subterranean gases, including ethylene, to rise to the surface and seep into the temple's inner chamber. The Pythia would sit over this fissure, breathing in these intoxicating vapors before delivering her prophecies. For the ancient Greeks, this was not a geological coincidence. The trembling earth and the strange, sweet-smelling breath rising from it were the literal presence of the god. The fault line was Apollo's conduit, and the intoxicated priestess was his living mouthpiece. Delphi was not built near a fault in spite of the danger. It was built precisely because the fault was there. It was the ultimate sacred site because it was the ultimate geological hot spot. Half a world away in Mesoamerica, a similar philosophy shaped the skyline. The great stepped pyramids that dominate ancient cities like Teotihuacan outside modern Mexico City were not just temples, they were symbolic mountains. They were often aligned on precise axes to mirror the profiles of the distant, sacred volcanoes that ringed the valleys. These volcanoes, like Popocatépetl, were seen as deities, sources of life giving rain and terrifying destruction. By building a human-made mountain in precise alignment with the volcanic one, the city planners were creating a symbolic circuit. They were attempting to draw the power of the sacred peak into the heart of their community, to align the energy of their rituals with the energy of the earth. The city's main avenue, the Street of the Dead, is itself aligned with a celestial point on the horizon, creating a grand axis that connected the underworld, the human realm, and the heavens. Every stone was placed according to a cosmic blueprint. This practice reveals a breathtaking worldview. The city was a microcosm, a carefully constructed model of the universe itself. By building it upon and in alignment with powerful geological features, the community believed it could maintain balance, ensure fertility, and secure divine favor. The layout was a permanent ritual, a prayer in stone and alignment that never ceased. It was an attempt to harness the telluric forces, the subtle energies of the earth for spiritual benefit. So when we look at these sites today, we must see them with dual vision. We see the practical fortress, the fertile fields, the strategic pass, but layered atop that is the sacred circuit board, the intentionally aligned monuments, the temples built over fissures, all designed to interface with a planet perceived as profoundly alive. This was the highest purpose of ancient urban planning, to build not just a place to live, but a conduit to the divine. The glittering Bay of Naples was the playground of the Roman elite, a coastline dotted with opulent villas where senators and poets escaped the capital's summer heat. At the heart of this idyll sat a lush, green mountain, Vesuvius, its slopes a patchwork of vibrant vineyards and orchards. The cities clinging to its base, Pompeii and Herculaneum, were not frontier outposts braving danger. They were the pinnacle of civilized life, thriving in a landscape of almost magical abundance. This was the ultimate expression of the bargain with the earth, a coexistence so successful it bred a fatal illusion of safety. The volcanic soil here was not just fertile, it was phenomenally productive. Writers of the time praised the region's wine, pressed from grapes grown in the mineral-rich ash, as among the finest in the empire. This agricultural wealth supported not just local families but fed a significant part of the Roman economy, with Pompeii's port bustling with amphorae filled with oil and wine. The prosperity was visible everywhere in the elaborate frescoes of seaside villas, the intricate mosaics underfoot, and the sophisticated engineering that graced these towns. They enjoyed a reliable water supply fed by mountain springs, and even had a complex system of lead pipes bringing fresh water directly into the homes of the wealthy. Life here was not a grim struggle against nature, it was a celebration of its bounty. The mountain itself was viewed not as a volcano, for that word did not exist in their understanding, but simply as a benign part of the scenery. The occasional tremors that shook the cups on their tables were just the grumblings of the giant below, a minor inconvenience in a land of such overwhelming generosity. Archaeological digs reveal no signs of mass exodus or panic in the years leading up to the eruption. Instead, they show a society in the midst of renovation, with buildings being repaired and upgraded, a testament to their confidence in a prosperous future. The residents of Pompeii and Herculaneum were not foolish. They were the beneficiaries of a perfect geological arrangement, reaping rewards so consistent and rich that the idea of ultimate peril faded from collective memory. The mountain had provided for them for generations. It had built their wealth from the ground up. Why would it ever take that away? This is the core of the cautionary tale. The very forces that enable a civilization to reach dazzling heights can also, in a single terrible moment, define its end. The eruption in the year 79 was a cataclysm of such scale it defied belief. A column of superheated ash and rock shot miles into the sky, then collapsed upon itself, racing down the mountain slopes as a pyroclastic surge of gas and debris at hurricane speeds. It was not lava that sealed the fate of these cities, but this suffocating, incinerating cloud. In Herculaneum, which was closer to the vent, the heat was so intense it vaporized organic matter instantly and made stone crack. In Pompeii, a rain of pumice and ash buried the city under many feet of blanket, preserving a heartbreaking snapshot of daily life interrupted. The event was so far outside lived experience that many had no framework to recognize the warning signs. The gifts had been so great, the partnership so long, that the final invoice, when it came, was unimaginable. The story of these cities is our most intimate window into the double-edged sword of geological fortune. It shows us how prosperity can blind us to peril, how a landscape that feels like a partner can become an executioner. Their ruins stand not as a monument to ignorance, but to the profound human tendency to normalize even the most powerful dangers when they are surrounded by daily comfort. We are left with a haunting question that echoes far beyond the ancient world. When we build our own societies upon foundations of immense natural power, whether for energy, for agriculture, or for commerce, how do we maintain a respectful vigilance? How do we remember that the forces that feed us are never truly tame? The vibrant civilizations of Mesoamerica offer perhaps the purest fusion of geology and belief, where entire cities were conceived as physical expressions of a sacred landscape. In the highlands of central Mexico, the Valley of Mexico is a vast bowl created by volcanic activity, ringed by towering peaks that were seen not as mountains but as deities. Within this dramatic arena, the greatest urban centers arose from a profound dialogue between earth and sky. Teotihuacan, the sprawling city of the gods, presents a monumental puzzle. Its builders aligned the entire metropolis with celestial precision, but they also bowed to terrestrial power. The central artery, the Street of the Dead, points directly at the massive bulk of the Cerro Gordo volcano. This was no accident of surveying. Cerro Gordo was considered a sacred mountain, a source of life-giving water, and a manifestation of a great earth goddess. By aligning their processional way with its silhouette, the planners of Teotihuacan were creating a permanent symbolic link. They were tethering the energy of their city to the energy of the mountain, ensuring that the spiritual power flowing from the land would animate their temples and bless their people. The very stones they used, the dark basalt and the gleaming obsidian, were gifts from those same volcanic peaks, turning the tools of daily life into fragments of the sacred. Centuries later, the Aztec vision for their capital, Tenochtitlan, took this concept to an even more daring extreme. Their founding myth is a story of divine instruction meeting geological reality. They believed their patron god, Huitzilopochtli, commanded them to wander until they saw an eagle perched on a cactus, devouring a snake. They found this sign on a small, swampy island in the middle of Lake Texcoco, a lake that filled the volcanic basin. By any practical measure, it was a terrible place to build a city. The ground was soft, unstable, and prone to flooding. It was seismically active, sitting on the same tectonic pressures that built the surrounding volcanoes. Yet for the Aztecs, the divine command was absolute. The eagle on the cactus was not just a sign, it was a cosmic blueprint. They saw the island not as a logistical nightmare, but as the symbolic center of the universe, the very spot where the heavens met the underworld. So they began the staggering work of geoengineering faith. They drove wooden piles into the soft lakebed to stabilize the earth. They created raised agricultural plots called chinampas from the fertile lake mud, turning the water into a source of miraculous bounty. They built causeways and canals, transforming a swamp into a glittering Venice of the New World. Their great temple was erected at the precise spot of the omen, a pyramid that represented the sacred mountain of Coatepec, the site of Huitzilopochtli's mythical birth. Every tremor that shook their temples was not a reason to leave, but a reaffirmation that they were living atop a place of immense power. In Mesoamerica, you did not choose a stable site and then add religion. You received a religious vision, and then you mastered the geology to make it manifest. The unstable, fertile, seismically charged ground was not a problem to solve, but the essential medium of creation. The city was the myth built in stone and soil. A narrow ribbon of water splits a continent in two, and upon its trembling banks rose a city destined to command the world. This is Istanbul, a metropolis born from a geological wound. The Bosporus Strait is not a river but a flooded valley, a deep scar carved by the immense North Anatolian Fault. This crack in the Earth's crust did not merely shape the land, it forged the ultimate geopolitical instrument. For over 2 millennia, whoever controlled this fault line controlled the gate. As the ancient Greek colony of Byzantium, and later the imperial capitals of Constantinople and Istanbul, the city's power flowed directly from this violent geology. The strait is the only maritime passage between the mineral-rich Black Sea and the trade-drenched Mediterranean. Every ship, every army, every caravan moving between Asia and Europe had to pass this choke point. The fault did not just make the city possible, it made the city inevitable. Its legendary natural harbor, the Golden Horn, is a sheltered inlet formed by the same tectonic subsidence, offering a perfect, defensible anchorage for vast fleets. The famous 7 hills of Istanbul are not gentle slopes, but ridges thrust upward by seismic pressure, providing commanders with panoramic views and formidable strongholds. From these heights, emperors and sultans could watch wealth flow through the channel below, collecting taxes and exerting control with a geographical authority written into the bedrock. This was the pinnacle of strategic urban planning, a masterclass in turning planetary upheaval into political supremacy. Yet the ground beneath this grandeur has never been still. The same fault that gifted Istanbul its unrivaled position also places it in perpetual jeopardy. The North Anatolian Fault is a transform boundary where two massive plates grind past each other, building up titanic stress that must eventually be released. History is punctuated by these terrible releases. In the year 557, a quake struck just as the magnificent Hagia Sophia was being dedicated, damaging its grand dome. In 1509, a massive tremor toppled minarets and shattered palaces, an event so devastating it was recorded as a divine warning. The city has been shaken, shattered, and rebuilt countless times, each generation inheriting both the glory and the looming threat. This relentless pressure did not lead to abandonment, but to astonishing innovation. Byzantine and Ottoman architects became pioneers of seismic resilience. Their great challenge was to build monuments to heaven that could withstand the hellish shaking from below. The solution lies in the very anatomy of their most iconic structure. The Hagia Sophia's revolutionary dome, seemingly floating on a ring of light, is supported by a genius feature, the pendentive. These are curved triangular segments that transition the square base of the building to the circular dome above. More than just an aesthetic marvel, they act as shock absorbers, distributing the immense weight and stress of the dome outward and downward, allowing the structure to flex and sway rather than crack under seismic strain. This was architectural adaptation in direct dialogue with the fault. Later Ottoman architects, studying the ruins of fallen Byzantine churches, perfected the use of flexible iron clamps between stones and designed slender, needle-like minarets that could oscillate independently of the main mosque structure. Istanbul is a living museum of seismic engineering, its skyline a testament to human ingenuity pitted against planetary force. The city embodies the ancient gamble in its most enduring form. For over 2,000 years, its rulers accepted the ever-present risk of catastrophic loss for the unmatched, permanent reward of global power. They bet their legacy on the fault line, and in doing so, wrote a master's thesis on why we build on the edge. The peril was the price of the throne, but the restless earth offered more than just water, it offered warmth. Beneath the trembling ground lay a reservoir of heat so vast it could power civilizations, a clean and constant energy source long before the concept of green energy existed. This was the fourth pillar of the ancient bargain, geothermal power, where faults allowed superheated water from deep within the planet to rise. They created oases of warmth in a cold world, places where the planet's inner fire could be tapped not for destruction, but for healing, sanitation, and community. The Romans were masters of this geothermal alchemy. In the misty, cool province of Britannia, they discovered a miraculous spring where steaming, mineral-rich water bubbled from the ground. They did not see a curious puddle, they saw an opportunity. They built the elaborate complex of Archaeoseismology, the city of Bath, around this spring, constructing a grand temple to the goddess Suli's Minerva and a sophisticated series of lead-lined pools and heating chambers. For the Roman legionaries stationed far from home, the baths were not a luxury. They were a vital piece of home, a place for hygiene, for social connection, and for treating the aches and injuries of military life. The warm, sulfurous waters were believed to cure ailments of the joints and skin, drawing people from across the province. This transformed a geologically active spot into a center of culture, medicine, and economic activity, a thriving town built entirely upon the gift of the Earth's internal furnace. Across the empire, from the steaming terraces of Hierapolis in Turkey to the hot springs of Baden in Switzerland, the pattern repeated. These were not random settlements, they were intentional destinations. The geothermal site became a hospital without walls, a place where the very ground participated in the work of healing. In colder, more remote frontiers, This energy was a matter of basic survival. Consider the Norse settlers who reached Iceland. They found a land of fire and ice where glacial rivers met volcanic plains. Here, the geothermal force was not just for bathing, it was baked into the fabric of daily life. They used the constant volcanic steam to cook their food in hot springs, a practice that required no firewood in a landscape often scarce of trees. They channeled the warm water through conduits to heat their longhouses, creating a sustainable, in-floor heating system centuries before modern technology. They even used the heat to create saunas, spaces for cleanliness and social bonding in a harsh climate. This represents a profound sophistication in environmental resource management. These communities looked at a landscape that could, at any moment, bury them in ash or shake their homes apart, and they saw a utility. They identified the specific manifestations of that power that could be harnessed, channeled, and put to work. They turned a potentially destructive force into a source of comfort, health, and social cohesion. The hot spring was more than a physical resource. It was a communal hearth, a place where people gathered, shared stories, and tended to one another's well-being. It turned a geologically dangerous zone into a place of literal warmth, both physical and social. This practical ingenuity underscores a central theme. Ancient societies were not passive victims of their environment. They were active, observant partners. They learned to read the complex language of the earth, distinguishing between the catastrophic events that demanded respect and the constant, gentle offerings that could sustain life. By building directly atop these geothermal veins, they plugged their communities into a permanent, renewable power grid, one that provided heat, health, and a tangible connection to the living planet beneath their feet. A trembling earth demands a story. Before science offered the language of tectonic plates, humanity turned to a far older lexicon, that of myth and monster. When the ground shook, it was not a random release of energy, it was a plot point in a divine drama, a direct action performed by a conscious, powerful being. This mythological lens did more than explain the unexplainable. It gave people a script to follow, a way to negotiate with the chaos. In ancient Japan, the islands were believed to rest on the back of a colossal catfish named Namezu. Normally, the god Kashima held a mighty stone over the creature's head, pinning it still. But when Kashima's vigilance wavered, Namezu would thrash its tail, shaking the entire land. This was not a metaphor, it was a literal truth for generations. The story provided a clear cause, a negligent deity, and by extension, a solution, reinforced the rituals at Kashima's shrine to ensure the god remained attentive. The earthquake became a manageable failure of divine duty, not a senseless act of nature. Across the sea, the Greeks saw the hand of Poseidon, the earth shaker. When the god of the seas struck his trident against the ground, the land would tremble in response. This made the peril of the sea and the peril of the land one and the same, governed by a single mercurial will. A city built near the coast on seismically active ground was living in Poseidon's dual domain. To secure safe passage for ships and stable ground for homes, you had to honor him. Temples rose at precarious capes, sacrifices were cast into the churning waves, and entire festivals were dedicated to appeasing his temper. The geological risk was seamlessly woven into the existing fabric of worship. These narratives served a profound psychological purpose. A random disaster is terrifying because it is meaningless, but a disaster with a story, with a god who can be angered or appeased, transforms chaos into a relationship. It introduces the possibility of influence. If the earthquake is Namezu's writhing, then we must strengthen our rituals. If it is Poseidon's strike, then we must build a more magnificent temple. The terrifying power of the earth is personified, brought into the realm of social interaction. This made life on the fault line not just bearable but purposeful. The city itself became the stage for this ongoing cosmic performance. Every tremor was a line of dialogue from the gods. The priests and rulers were the directors and lead actors, tasked with interpreting the signs and performing the correct rituals to keep the story moving in a favorable direction. Maintenance of a temple was not civic upkeep, it was preventative medicine for the entire community. A festival was not mere celebration, it was a crucial renewal of a contract with the divine. This mythological coding embedded the ever-present risk into a system of controllable, daily practice. The danger was not ignored, it was ritualized, tamed through ceremony, and given a name. To live in such a city was to be a participant in a grand, sacred narrative, where your actions, your prayers, and your very architecture were part of a constant conversation with the foundations of the world. The ground did not just shake, it spoke, and in their myths our ancestors learned how to reply. The stories are etched not only in scrolls but in stone itself. A wall does not simply fall, it tells a story in its collapse. A perfectly laid pavement does not merely buckle, it records a precise moment of terror in its warped surface. This is the domain of archaeoseismology, the science of reading earthquakes in the ruins of the past. It is the forensic tool that allows us to move beyond compelling theories and into the realm of hard evidence, to see the actual seismic events that shaped, and often shattered, the cities we have been discussing. These specialists are detectives of disaster, examining ancient masonry with a geologist's eye. They look for specific, telltale signatures that only immense ground shaking can leave behind. An offset wall, where one section has slid several inches along a straight line relative to the section beside it, is a textbook clue. It indicates the ground itself fractured and moved along a fault trace right beneath the city. Collapsed columns that all fell in the same direction, like dominoes pushed by a single, violent wave, point to the directional force of a seismic shock. They also search for evidence of liquefaction, a phenomenon where water-saturated soil temporarily loses its strength during intense shaking, behaving like a liquid. In ruins, this can appear as layers of sand that have erupted through cracks in stone floors, forming small volcanoes of sediment that hardened in place centuries ago. Each of these features is a data point, a physical timestamp of the Earth's violence. At the ancient site of Megiddo in Israel, famed in historical texts, archaeoseismologists have identified clear layers of seismic destruction sandwiched between periods of rebuilding. They can match these damaged strata with specific historical accounts of city-wide disasters, proving that chroniclers were not just recording political or military defeats, but very real geological events. A biblical description of walls falling down begins to read less like metaphor and more like a journalist's report from the field. This scientific discipline builds a crucial bridge between the soft clay tablets of history and the hard bedrock of geology. By carefully analyzing these architectural wounds, researchers can reconstruct not just the fact of an earthquake, but often its intensity, its direction, and even its epicenter. They can begin to build a timeline, a seismic history for a city that shows these catastrophic events were not rare, once-in-a-millennium occurrences, but recurring challenges that each generation had to face and overcome. This transforms our entire understanding. It proves that the ancient builders and dwellers of these cities were not merely storytellers weaving myths about angry gods. They were pragmatic survivors of measurable, repeated cataclysms. The sacred geography, the innovative engineering, the profound myths, all of it was developed in direct response to a documented physical reality. The cracked stones are their testimony, and archaeoseismology gives them a voice, confirming that the ground upon which they built their glory was, and always had been, very much alive. A community forged in fire and trembling earth is bound by more than just shared streets. This constant, looming threat did more than shape architecture. It sculpted the human spirit, weaving a collective identity of extraordinary resilience. When the ground beneath your feet could betray you at any moment, your survival became inextricably linked to that of your neighbor. This shared vulnerability created a powerful social adhesive, a culture of mutual dependence where individual strength was secondary to communal strength. The city became a single organism, its people united by a common, ever-present adversary, the planet itself. This psychological bond transformed peril into purpose, forging a unique civic character defined by preparedness, adaptability, and an almost defiant pride. In ancient Antioch, modern-day Antakya in Turkey, a city famously built on a seismically active plain, this dynamic was etched into daily life. The community developed not just specialized building techniques with flexible wooden frames and lighter upper stories, but a whole social protocol for disaster. They maintained communal stores of emergency materials, organized neighborhood watch systems to check on the vulnerable after tremors, and held annual ceremonies to honor the gods of the earth and commemorate past deliverances. These were not optional traditions, they were essential survival skills, rituals that reinforced the message, "We are in this together." The authority of leaders, whether priests or kings, was deeply tied to this dynamic. A ruler who could convincingly interpret the omens of the earth, or who organized effective reconstruction after a quake, solidified power not through conquest but through perceived protection. They positioned themselves as the essential intermediaries between the volatile earth and the vulnerable populace. In Lisbon before the Great Earthquake of 1755, a similar culture of maritime and geological risk had created a society known for its pragmatic piety and tight-knit merchant families. The shared understanding of danger, from storms at sea to tremors on land, fostered a collective identity built on mutual insurance, both literal and social. This profound in-group bonding, this us against the elements mentality, provided a psychological foundation that was often stronger than the physical one. It explains the astonishing tenacity to rebuild. Why return to a pile of rubble on a dangerous fault? Because home was not just the stones, it was the people, the shared memory, and the hard-earned identity carved out in that specific, demanding place. To abandon the site was to abandon a part of their collective soul, to surrender to the very force they had built their character defying. Their repeated choice to rebuild, generation after generation, was the ultimate declaration: this ground, however treacherous, is ours. The peril did not destroy their community. It defined it, creating a cultural glue that proved more durable than any monument they could erect upon the shaking soil. This fertility was not a happy accident, but a direct chemical gift from the abyss. The secret lies in the very nature of volcanic ash. When a volcano erupts, it pulverizes rock from deep within the Earth's mantle, ejecting it as a fine, mineral-rich powder. Over time, this ash weathers into a unique type of soil known as andesol. Unlike the tired, leached-out soils of ancient, stable continental interiors, andesols are young, vibrant, and incredibly generous. They are packed with essential plant nutrients like potassium, phosphorus, and calcium, elements that are often scarce on the surface but abundant in the planet's fiery interior. But their magic goes beyond mere mineral content. The microscopic structure of volcanic ash particles is porous, like a sponge. This allows the soil to retain both moisture and nutrients with an almost stubborn tenacity, preventing them from washing away with the first heavy rain. For a farmer with only simple tools, this was a miracle. It meant crops could thrive through dry spells, required less frequent fertilization, and produced dramatically higher yields. To settle on this soil was to be handed the keys to a natural supermarket, perpetually restocked from below. Nowhere is this relationship more vividly clear than on the island of Java, part of the Indonesian archipelago. Java is one of the most volcanically active places on the planet, a string of fiery mountains running down its spine. It is also one of the most densely populated agricultural regions in the world, and has been for over 1,000 years. The ancient kingdoms that rose here, like Mataram and Majapahit, were not built in spite of the volcanoes but because of them. The periodic eruptions, while devastating in the immediate term, continually renewed the fertility of the surrounding plains. Rice paddies terraced the lower slopes, producing multiple harvests a year, supporting not just villages but immense cities, sophisticated courts, and grand temple complexes like Borobudur. The volcanoes were the silent partners in this civilization, their destructive potential directly funding its creative and political power. This agricultural superabundance is the unsung hero of history. Surplus food is the absolute foundation of everything we recognize as civilization. When a community can grow more than it needs to eat today, everything changes. Not everyone has to farm. This frees individuals to become artisans, priests, soldiers, scribes, or rulers. Specialization is born. With specialization comes trade, complex social structures, monumental architecture, standing armies, and recorded history. The arts flourish because there is time and resources to support beauty beyond mere utility. In essence, the choice to build a city on volcanic soil was a calculated investment in a future of complexity and grandeur. The community was accepting an existential mortgage, a debt that might one day be called in by a catastrophic eruption, in exchange for the daily, compounding interest of phenomenal harvests. They were betting their long-term survival on the short-term certainty of abundance. It was a gamble that powered the rise of empires from Central America to the Mediterranean, proving that sometimes the most stable foundation for a soaring civilization is the very ground that occasionally remembers how to burn. The vibrant frescoes of the Minoans show a world of grace and motion, of leaping dolphins and elegant courtiers in a landscape of stunning abundance. Their palaces, like the sprawling complex of Knossos on Crete, were not fortified citadels but open, airy centers of administration and art, a testament to a long era of peace and prosperity. This golden age unfolded under the watchful presence of a slumbering giant, the volcano on the island of Thera, 100 kilometers to the north. For centuries, the relationship was not one of fear, but of profound utility. The Minoans were master builders and even more masterful sailors, and the volcano provided for both. They quarried the lightweight, easy-to-work volcanic tuff and pumice from Thera itself, using it as a primary building material. This stone allowed them to construct the multi-storied, complex structures that defined their architectural genius with a relative efficiency. More importantly, the volcanic ash that periodically dusted the region and settled into the seafloor created a slow-release fertilizer, enriching the soils of Crete and the surrounding Aegean islands. This geological bounty supported the agriculture that fed their dense populations and fueled the surplus that made their art and trade possible. Their maritime empire, a network of trading posts and influence that stretched across the Cycladic islands, many of which were themselves volcanic peaks, was a direct engagement with this fiery geography. They were not living in the shadow of a volcano, but in its economic and cultural sphere. The calm, predictable eruptions of the past had built the foundation of their civilization. Then, around the year 1600 before the Common Era, the foundation spoke. The Theran volcano did not simply erupt, it detonated in one of the largest cataclysms in human history. The central part of the island collapsed into a boiling magma chamber, creating the vast, water-filled caldera we see today as Santorini. The explosion generated tsunamis that radiated outward, with waves estimated to have been tens of meters high crashing into the northern coast of Crete. These walls of water would have obliterated the Minoan fleet, their primary source of power and wealth, and scoured their coastal settlements, ports, and palaces clean. The sky would have darkened for weeks under a plume of ash, crippling agriculture and plunging the region into a volcanic winter. The sophisticated, centralized economy of the Minoans, so dependent on trade and stable harvests, could not withstand such a multifaceted assault. While Knossos and other centers struggled on for some generations, they were severely weakened, their influence shattered. This created a power vacuum that was eagerly filled by the more warlike mainland Mycenaean Greeks, who would eventually conquer Crete and inherit its legacy. The event was so colossal, so far beyond ordinary experience, that many scholars believe it etched itself into regional memory, evolving over centuries into the legend of Atlantis, a magnificent island civilization that sank beneath the sea in a single day and night. The Minoan case is the archetype of the geological bargain's final clause. Here was a culture that refined itself to its highest point using the gifts of a volatile earth, achieving a level of sophistication that still astounds us. Their story demonstrates how a civilization can become perfectly adapted to the gentle, productive rhythms of a sleeping power, only to be utterly unprepared for when it finally wakes. Their fate is a haunting lesson in geological time, reminding us that the forces which build a world of dolphins and frescoes operate on a clock whose alarm we cannot predict and whose ring we may not survive. The lessons of the trembling earth were not just remembered, they were literally built into the walls. Confronted with a force that could shatter stone, ancient engineers did not simply build stronger, they built smarter, pioneering a philosophy of resilience that allowed their structures to dance with the disaster rather than stand rigidly against it. This was architecture in active conversation with the ground, a brilliant adaptation where flexibility triumphed over brute strength. In the high Andes, the Inca faced a landscape constantly reshaped by tectonic collisions. Their response was a masterclass in seismic engineering, visible in every perfectly fitted stone of Machu Picchu and Sacsayhuaman. They constructed trapezoidal doors and windows, a shape far more stable than a rectangle under lateral shaking. More ingeniously, they often used a technique of flexible, timber-laced masonry. They would lay courses of stone, then insert horizontal wooden beams, then another course of stone, and so on. During an earthquake, these wooden layers acted as shock absorbers, allowing the walls to flex and sway as a unified, elastic unit instead of cracking apart. The structure could bend and then settle back into place, its integrity maintained. This was not decorative, it was a deliberate, life-saving design feature born from generations of observation. Half a world away, in the rocky heart of Anatolia, the Hittite capital of Hattusa faced similar challenges. Their massive defensive walls, built to withstand sieges, also had to survive the region's frequent quakes. The solution was again found in combining materials. Builders incorporated long wooden beams horizontally within the stone and mud brick construction. These beams, often oak, created a continuous tensile skeleton throughout the wall, holding the masonry together like a net during shaking and distributing the stress evenly. This wooden reinforcement meant that when the ground moved, the wall could move with it as a cohesive whole, rather than collapsing into a pile of rubble. This knowledge was not lost but passed down and refined over millennia, becoming a cornerstone of building tradition in the earthquake-prone lands of Turkey and the wider Mediterranean. Perhaps the most elegant example of this dance with dynamics comes from Japan, where the iconic multi-tiered pagoda was engineered to defy the very forces that threatened it. Built in a land of typhoons and tremors, the pagoda's secret lies not in deep foundations, but in a brilliant central pillar called the Shinbashira. This massive wooden column is suspended from the top of the structure, hanging loosely through the center of its floors, not firmly anchored at the base. The floors themselves are built as separate, stacked boxes connected by complex, flexible joinery. When the earth shakes or a storm wind blows, these boxes can sway independently, sliding past each other. The hanging central pillar then acts like a giant pendulum, swinging in the opposite direction to counterbalance the motion, damping the energy and preventing a catastrophic resonance. It is a system of controlled, graceful movement, allowing the tower to absorb and dissipate energy that would topple a rigid structure. These innovations reveal a profound, accumulated wisdom. Each collapse was studied, each near miss analyzed. Over centuries, these hard-won lessons were codified into an unwritten building code of stone, wood, and intuition. This was an indigenous science of survival, a dialogue between human creativity and relentless geological force. The architects were listening to the land, and in their blueprints we can still hear the reply. The fault line did more than shape the landscape, it could reshape the human mind. At the heart of many ancient spiritual traditions lies a profound mystery, the oracle, a human conduit for divine messages. Modern research suggests that the very ground these prophets stood upon may have been an active participant in their visions. This brings us to a remarkable intersection of geology, chemistry, and faith, where the Earth's breath was believed to be the very breath of a god. Certain fault lines release more than just seismic energy. They can emit subtle gases from deep within the planet. Ethylene, for instance, is a hydrocarbon with a slightly sweet smell, known to have mild, trance-inducing effects. Inhaling it in a confined space can produce a detached, dreamlike state, a sense of floating, and a loosening of conscious thought. For a culture interpreting all natural phenomena through a spiritual lens, these symptoms would not be seen as chemical intoxication, but as the literal possession of a person by a divine presence. The most iconic case is the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. For centuries, the Pythia, the priestess of the oracle, would descend into a sunken chamber, sit on a tripod over a fissure in the rock, and breathe in the strange, sweet-smelling vapors rising from below. In that altered state, she would utter the fragmented, often cryptic phrases that priests would then interpret as the god Apollo's will. Her pronouncements shaped the founding of colonies, the outcomes of wars, and the fates of kings. The power of Delphi was not merely symbolic, it was geochemical. The fault line beneath the temple was not a hazard to be mitigated. It was the sacred apparatus itself, the hardware for divine communication. This pattern may have repeated elsewhere. Near Naples, the cave of the Sibyl at Cumae was another famed oracular site, located in a volcanic region rich in geothermal activity. While direct evidence is harder to pinpoint, the geological setting is strikingly similar, suggesting that the mysterious prophecies uttered there might also have flowed from a tangible, terrestrial source. This creates a startlingly literal connection. The trembling, gaseous earth was not just a metaphor for divine power, it was the delivery mechanism. A community that controlled such a site held something beyond military or economic might. It possessed soft power of the highest order. To have the definitive line to the gods was to have the ultimate authority, making your city the spiritual and political center of the known world. Pilgrims, ambassadors, and generals would journey for months, bearing lavish gifts, simply to ask a question of the trembling priestess in the gas-filled room. The geological boundary thus became the direct source of a city's prestige and influence, a natural wonder that translated into unparalleled geopolitical clout. The ground did not just provide wealth or defense, it provided certainty in an uncertain world, and in doing so, commanded the allegiance of nations. A king's power is measured not just by the armies he commands, but by the ground he dares to claim. To place your palace upon a trembling fault line or your throne room in the shadow of a smoldering peak was the ultimate political theater. This was not urban planning, it was a performance of sovereignty, a deliberate act of symbolic dominance that shouted a ruler's authority to both his subjects and the gods. The message was clear: if I can master this, the most fearsome force in our world, then my rule over you is absolute and ordained. The city itself became a living monument, its very survival against the odds a continuous propaganda piece for the dynasty. Consider the ancient Hittite kings who built their capital, Hattusa, in the rugged, earthquake-prone highlands of Anatolia. By erecting their massive walls and grand gates upon that restless ground, they were making a statement of unshakable permanence. Every tremor that failed to topple their citadel was not a disaster, but a reaffirmation of their power, proof that their authority was rooted deeper than any geological shock. The ruler positioned himself as the essential mediator, the one who stood between the chaotic, divine fury of the earth and the ordered, safe world of his people. His rituals and his very presence were the dam holding back the chaos, a role that granted him unparalleled legitimacy. This symbolic calculus reached its zenith in imperial Rome. When emperors constructed their sprawling palaces on the Palatine Hill, they were building upon a site rich with mythic foundations, ground associated with Romulus and the very birth of the city. But the Palatine is also a geological formation, a plateau created by ancient volcanic activity. To build there was to physically and symbolically elevate oneself above the populace, to inhabit a space that was both historically sacred and naturally potent. The palace complex was not just a home, it was a statement carved into the landscape of Rome, declaring the emperor's role as the pinnacle of human and divine order. In the Americas, the Maya rulers of Copan in Honduras demonstrated a similar mastery. They constructed their acropolis, a complex of temples and palaces, directly adjacent to the Copan River, which had carved a deep gorge through the soft volcanic tuff. This was not a safe, removed location. It was a dramatic, precarious stage. By placing their most sacred and administrative buildings on the very edge of this geological scar, the kings of Copan visually demonstrated their command over the environment. They showed they could harness the river's path and defy the land's tendency to collapse, turning a site of natural danger into a platform for their undisputed authority. The act of building on such a site was itself a kingly deed, a narrative of conquest over nature that was retold every time a subject looked up at the imposing structures on the cliff edge. This transforms our understanding of these cities. The defensive benefits, the resources, the sacred connections, all of these were amplified and channeled through the figure of the ruler. The geological stage became his personal proving ground, his enduring city, constantly repaired and rebuilt after each seismic whisper, was not a testament to collective resilience alone, but a chronicle in stone of a dynasty's divine right to rule. The ground might shake, but the throne, they proclaimed, would not. A city's alignment with the stars was never just about astronomy. It was about creating a resonant harmony between the heavens above and the restless earth below. This ancient practice, known broadly as geomancy, sought to weave terrestrial power and celestial order into a single, living blueprint. Communities believed that by aligning their most important structures with specific geological features and astronomical events, they could channel beneficial energies, ensure cosmic favor, and create a perfect environment for their civilization to flourish. The ground was not merely a foundation, it was one half of a sacred equation completed by the movement of the sun and stars. In this worldview, a fault line was more than a source of tremors, it was an energy line, a terrestrial current of power. A volcanic peak was more than a mountain, it was a fixed point connecting the underworld to the sky. When you oriented your city's main avenue to point directly at the solstice sunrise over that sacred peak, you were doing more than planning streets. You were constructing a cosmic circuit, a permanent channel for divine energy to flow into the heart of your community. This was city building as a form of spiritual engineering, where every angle and axis held profound meaning. The ancient Egyptians were masters of this celestial choreography. The city of Thebes, modern-day Luxor, was laid out with meticulous precision. Its grand temples of Karnak and Luxor were connected by a long, ceremonial avenue lined with sphinxes. This axis was not random, it was deliberately aligned with the path of the sun and with the Nile's own flow, which itself follows a deep geological rift. The entire complex was designed to mirror the journey of the sun god Ra, with the temple gateways and inner sanctuaries positioned so that on specific holy days, sunlight would penetrate deep into the darkest chambers, symbolically reviving the gods within. The life-giving Nile and the solar cycle were locked in an architectural embrace, with the city acting as the conductor. A similar philosophy guided the planners of ancient China, where the art of geomancy was known as feng shui, the wind and water. Selecting a site for a capital city or an imperial tomb was a science of balancing energies known as kai. The ideal location, according to classical texts, was protected at the back by a mountain range, the Black Tortoise with lower hills, the Azure Dragon and White Tiger flanking the sides, and an open plain with a meandering watercourse, the Vermilion Bird, to the front. This configuration was believed to gather and hold beneficial chi while deflecting harmful influences. Significantly, many of these protective mountain ranges were, and are seismically active, formed by the colossal tectonic pressures of the Asian continent. The early capital of Zion, for instance, sits in a fertile basin bordered by such mountains. The planners saw these towering, geologically young peaks not as threats, but as powerful protective dragons, their very dynamism a sign of potent earthly energy. By situating the city within this energized embrace, aligned to the cardinal directions and the flow of rivers, they aimed to tap into a source of stability and prosperity that was both earthly and cosmic. This interplay reaches across cultures. In the Americas, the great Mesoamerican city of Teotihuacan, as we've seen, aligned its Street of the Dead with the Cerro Gordo volcano. But its grid also shows precise alignments to the Pleiades star cluster and the sun's position on certain dates. The pyramid complexes of the Maya are famously oriented to solar and Venusian cycles, often built upon raised ground that amplified their connection to both the sky and the subterranean world. In each case, the geological feature provided the anchor, the permanent, powerful node of terrestrial energy. The celestial alignment provided the timing, the rhythm, and the divine script. Together, they created a four-dimensional map, a sacred coordinate in space and time where a city could be more than a collection of buildings. It could become a tuned instrument, resonating with the fundamental forces of the universe. The choice to build on an active boundary, therefore, was often the first step in fulfilling a much grander cosmic blueprint, where the trembling of the earth was just one note in a vast, harmonious symphony. Control the source and you control the world. This is the stark economic reality born from a unique geological gift. When a city was fortunate enough to be built directly atop the planet's only known source of a vital material, it didn't just have a resource, it held a key. It could lock or unlock the progress of entire regions, transforming a volatile patch of ground into the engine of an economic empire. This was the power of geological monopoly, a form of natural wealth so concentrated it could make a city of stone and mud the central bank for an age. The logic was brutally simple. If you needed the sharpest blade, the best medicine, or the purest metal, you had to come to them. The trembling earth was not a factory floor but a vault, and they alone possessed the combination. Take the gleaming black glass of obsidian. In a world before metal, this volcanic rock was a technological marvel. It could be knapped into blades sharper than modern surgical steel, into mirrors that reflected the soul, and into ceremonial objects of profound beauty. But it only forms under very specific volcanic conditions, making its deposits rare and precious. In the ancient Near East, one of the most prolific sources was the volcanic plateau of central Anatolia in modern Turkey. The early settlement of Çatalhöyük, one of the world's first great towns, thrived in this landscape. While not a city in a later sense, its dense, honeycomb architecture and advanced culture were undoubtedly supported by its access to, and likely early management of, these obsidian flows. They lived on the raw material of progress. Merchants would travel vast distances to acquire this black gold, and the community that controlled the quarry held a silent, formidable power over the cutting edge of civilization, from scalpels to spears. Then there is sulfur, the yellow mineral that smells of the underworld. For ancient societies, its value was immense and multifaceted. It was a fundamental ingredient in early medicines and salves. It was burned as a fumigant to purify sacred spaces, homes, and even ships, driving out pests and what were believed to be malign spirits. In later periods, it became crucial for alchemy and early chemistry. But sulfur, in its pure, collectible form, is primarily found coating the vents and craters of active volcanoes, a dangerous harvest from the breath of the mountain. A city that controlled a major sulfur deposit controlled a pillar of public health, ritual purity, and emerging science. They could set the price for sanctity and sanitation, creating a different kind of dependency, one rooted in the well-being of body and spirit. This model of exclusivity turns the geological boundary into more than a hazard or a holy site. It becomes a specialized economic zone. The city isn't just located near a resource, it is physically fused with it. The fault line or volcanic field is the natural factory, the warehouse, and the loading dock all in one. This creates a unique urban identity. Instead of being a general trading hub, the city becomes a company town for the planet itself, its entire social structure and external relations shaped by this one incredible export. Its artisans become the world's experts in working that material. Its merchants become the sole authorized distributors. Its leaders become the regulators of a global supply chain. This economic reality provided a stability that defied the unstable ground. Political borders might shift, alliances might rise and fall, but the need for that unique resource remained constant. An army could besiege the city, but it could not move the mountain that contained the wealth. A rival could win a battle, but they could not replicate the geological accident that created the deposit. This granted the city a form of perpetual relevance, a built-in insurance policy written in stone and mineral. Their influence was not projected by soldiers alone, but by the quiet arrival of an obsidian blade in a distant land, or the pungent smell of sacred sulfur smoke in a foreign temple. Their unstable foundation, therefore, became the most stable aspect of their power, a natural monopoly that no human kingdom could break. The ground did not just tremble, it traded. And it made those who lived upon it the brokers for an entire era. This cyclical view of the cosmos transformed catastrophe into a sacred process. For cultures living on the edge, the violent shudder of an earthquake or the fiery breath of a volcano was not a meaningless end, but a necessary and even holy transition. Their entire world was built upon the understanding that creation requires destruction, that new life must be fed by the ashes of the old. This was not a metaphor, but a lived reality written in the trembling of the ground beneath their temples. To experience such an event was to witness the universe itself turning its great wheel, a moment of both terror and profound theological significance. In this light, the decision to rebuild upon the same shattered stones was far more than a practical response to disaster. It was a deliberate act of faith, a ritual performed on a city-wide scale to align human endeavor with the fundamental rhythms of existence. They were not defying the gods by rebuilding, they were collaborating with them, participating in the divine work of renewal. This philosophy is captured perfectly in the Hindu concept of the cosmic dance of Shiva, the Nataraja. Shiva, as the lord of destruction and regeneration, dances within a ring of fire, one foot crushing a demon of ignorance while the other is raised in a gesture of liberation and grace. His dance sustains the cycle of the universe, dissolving old forms to make way for new creation. The imagery is strikingly volcanic, a figure of both terrifying power and serene balance, whose movement shakes the foundations of the world only to allow for a more perfect order to emerge. For a community that venerated such a deity, an eruption was not a punishment but a performance. The lava flow was Shiva's dance made visible, the ash cloud his veil. To abandon the site would be to walk out of the theater in the middle of the sacred act. Instead, they stayed, and with each stone they reset, they joined the dance. They became co-creators in the ongoing saga of the cosmos. This belief system provided a resilience that mere stubbornness could never match. When your city is destroyed, you are not facing oblivion, you are fulfilling prophecy. You are living through the destruction phase of the cycle, with the sacred certainty that the rebirth phase must follow. The work of clearing rubble and laying new foundations becomes a form of worship, a collective prayer for the new age to dawn. This transforms hardship into purpose. The grief of loss is framed by the hope of renewal, making the psychological burden of repeated disaster somehow bearable, even meaningful. It answers the haunting question of why return with a profound and beautiful logic. You return because the ground is not just your home, it is the stage where the drama of existence plays out. You rebuild because to do so is to affirm the most fundamental truth you know, that from the fire, life always returns. This cosmic partnership with catastrophe may be the deepest layer of all, the spiritual bedrock that made every other practical reason for building on the edge not just acceptable, but divinely ordained. The sea was the ancient world's ultimate highway, and the best ports were gifts of the same violence that shook the land. Tectonic activity does not merely fracture continents, it sculpts the stage for maritime empires. Where plates collide or pull apart, they drop blocks of land, carve deep inlets, and build protective headlands, creating the rarest and most valuable of real estate, a perfect natural harbor. For a city seeking wealth and power, a deep, sheltered anchorage along an active coast was a prize worth any seismic gamble. It was the guarantee of life itself in a world connected by water. Consider the legendary city of Corinth in ancient Greece. Its immense wealth and influence flowed directly from a geological accident, the Gulf of Corinth. This long, narrow body of water is essentially a giant crack in the Earth's crust, a graben valley formed by the subsidence of land between parallel fault lines. The result was a deep waterway protected by steep cliffs, a maritime superhighway that cut the Peloponnese Peninsula off from mainland Greece. Corinth controlled the narrow isthmus between this gulf and the Saronic Gulf to the east. They built a stone trackway, the Diolkos, where ships could be dragged across the land, allowing merchants to avoid the treacherous sea voyage around the peninsula. By mastering this fault-defined geography, Corinth became the toll booth for Mediterranean trade, taxing every vessel that sought the safer, faster passage. Their harbors, Leccean on the Corinthian Gulf and Kenkrii on the Saronic, were not just docks, they were the valves controlling the flow of ancient commerce. The city's location was a masterstroke of geological strategy, turning a continental fracture into a financial empire. This pattern repeats wherever the sea meets a restless coast. Volcanic activity often creates sheltered caldera harbors, like the spectacular bay at Santorini, which is the flooded remnant of the Minoan era eruption. Though catastrophic in its formation, such a harbor offers incredible protection from storms and waves. Tectonic subsidence can drown river valleys, creating deep, finger-like inlets or weirs that provide miles of navigable, protected shoreline. A city built at the head of such an inlet controlled not just a port, but an entire inland water network. The choice for ancient planners was stark. You could build your city inland on stable, safe ground, but then you were isolated, dependent on overland trade that was slow, expensive, and vulnerable to bandits. Or you could build on a seismically active coast where the ground might tremble, but your deep water port placed you at the center of a global network. The port was your lifeline to grain from Egypt, tin from Britain, silk from China, and ideas from every corner of the known world. It allowed for a naval presence, enabling you to project power across the waves rather than just defend your walls. This maritime imperative often overruled every other concern. A geologically crafted harbor was a permanent economic engine. Earthquakes might damage the warehouses and topple the statues along the waterfront, but they could not erase the deep water channel or remove the protective headland. The harbor itself was the indestructible asset. After a disaster, you rebuilt the city because the harbor, the reason for the city's existence, was still there, waiting. This is why urban centers so often cling to the very edges of tectonic plates. The coastlines shaped by these immense forces become the world's meeting points, the bustling interfaces where continents exchange not just goods but cultures, languages, and innovations. The risk of the shaking shore was the price of admission to the greatest network ever created, one that moved not on roads but on the restless, forgiving sea. Yet even the most profound partnership with the earth has its breaking point. For every city that rose again from its own rubble, there is a silent place where the stones were never reset, where the streets were left to the wind. These ghost cities stand as solemn counterpoints, reminding us that the ancient gamble was not always won. There came a moment for some when the tremors grew too frequent, the disasters too severe, or the social fabric too frayed to muster another rebirth. The calculation finally tipped, and the price of staying outweighed every memory of prosperity. The mighty Hittite capital of Hattusa, whose wooden-laced walls were engineered to dance with quakes, may tell such a tale. For centuries, it thrived as the nerve center of a formidable empire, a testament to resilience built upon restless ground. Yet around 1200 before the Common Era, this great power crumbled. While invasions and political unrest played their part, archaeologists note a compelling geological thread. The city's final layers show not a single catastrophic destruction, but evidence of repeated, severe seismic events. It is a plausible scenario that a relentless series of major earthquakes in a short period could have shattered the very infrastructure of the state-collapsing granaries, disrupting water systems, and demolishing the monumental temples that were the bedrock of royal authority. A kingdom can survive an army at its gates, but can it survive when the ground beneath its throne room continually betrays it? The earthquakes may not have delivered the final blow, but they could have critically weakened the empire, making it vulnerable to pressures it might otherwise have withstood. Hattusa's eventual abandonment whispers a lesson about cumulative strain, about a resilience that was finally, exhaustively spent. An even more dramatic departure from the land occurred on the shores of the Gulf of Corinth. The prosperous city of Hylike was a member of the Achaean League, known for its sanctuary dedicated to Poseidon, the earth-shaking god of the sea. In the winter of 373 before the Common Era, the region was struck by a colossal earthquake. The ground beneath Hylike liquefied, and the city simply slid into the waters of the Gulf, followed moments later by a devastating tsunami that swept over the ruins. The event was so sudden and complete that the city vanished, leaving only a few survivors to tell the tale. Ancient writers reported that for years afterwards, the bronze statue of Poseidon could be seen beneath the waves, a haunting monument to a swallowed city. Unlike others, Hylike was never rebuilt. The cataclysm was of such totality, erasing the very site itself, that the cost of return was rendered infinite. The geological boundary here did not just issue a warning, it reclaimed its territory entirely. These abandonments are not failures of will, but evidence of a realistic and evolving calculus. They establish a crucial threshold in the ancient relationship with dangerous ground. When disaster struck with an intensity that obliterated not just buildings but the very landscape, or when it recurred with a frequency that outran a society's capacity to recover, the logic of the bargain dissolved. Political fragmentation could accelerate this process. A community that had lost its central authority and shared purpose simply lacked the collective will to undertake the Herculean task of starting over. The stories of Hattusa and Helike serve as poignant bookends to our exploration. They prove that the ancient choice to build on the edge was never an unconditional pact, but a constant, fragile negotiation. It was a dialogue with the planet that required not just reverence and ingenuity, but a sober assessment of limits. These silent cities are perhaps the most powerful teachers of all, reminding us that respect for the Earth's power must sometimes be expressed not by rebuilding, but by remembering and by letting go. The ancient dialogue with the trembling Earth has not ended. It has simply changed language. Today, the world's greatest megacities stand upon the same restless ground that cradled Teotihuacan and Constantinople. Tokyo, a sprawling metropolis of 37 million, is built directly atop the intersection of three massive tectonic plates. Los Angeles is stretched across the San Andreas Fault system, a landscape in slow, grinding motion. Mexico City, one of the most populous urban areas on the planet, sits on the soft, waterlogged sediments of a former lakebed within a volcanic basin, amplifying every distant tremor. We have not abandoned the ancient sites, we have supercharged them, building towers of glass and steel where temples of stone once stood. The modern calculus is a staggering equation of inertia. The economic, cultural, and historical weight of these places is now so immense that the idea of relocation is not just impractical, it is unthinkable. Trillions of dollars in infrastructure, centuries of layered history, and the lives of tens of millions are anchored to these geologically active zones. We are bound to them not by the will of gods but by the gravity of our own creation. So we have turned from appeasement to engineering, from ritual to risk management. We build skyscrapers on massive shock absorbers and rubber bearings that allow them to sway like metronomes during a quake. We lace our buildings with steel frames designed to bend without breaking. We deploy networks of seismic sensors that can, in the best cases, give precious seconds of warning, enough to stop trains, shut down gas lines, and signal people to take cover. We trust in our science to map the faults and our codes to fortify our walls. But beneath this technological confidence, the fundamental attractions remain eerily familiar. These modern cities, too, are lured by the gifts of the edge. Southern California's agricultural wealth and pleasant climate are tied to its geological setting. Tokyo's incredible economic power is inseparable from its position on a coastal plain created by tectonic subsidence, giving it a vast, sheltered port. Mexico City's historical dominance stems from the same agricultural fertility and strategic basin that empowered the Aztecs. We are still here for the resources, the strategic locations, and the profound cultural roots, just as our ancestors were. This forces a humbling reflection. Are we truly wiser or simply better equipped? We have replaced the oracle with the seismograph and the temple sacrifice with the building code. Yet we share the same core gamble, accepting a known, catastrophic risk in exchange for daily prosperity and global influence. We no longer believe the ground shakes because a god is angry, but we must still live with the consequences as if it were. Our early warning systems are a form of modern divination, our engineering a new kind of sacred geometry designed to interpret and survive the Earth's power. The thread from past to present is unbroken. It reveals a continuous, defining strand of human civilization, our enduring and precarious partnership with a dynamic planet. We have not ended the conversation that began at Delphi. We have just learned to listen with different instruments. A single thread cannot explain the tapestry. We have followed separate strands: defense, water, wealth, and faith, each compelling on its own. But the true power of these ancient choices lies in their convergence. A geological boundary was rarely a one-trick pony. The same tectonic collision that thrust up a defensible cliff also fractured the bedrock, allowing a perennial spring to bubble forth. The volcanic eruption that terrified a generation also laid down a blanket of soil so rich it could feed a city for centuries. The fault that shook the temples also guided mineral-laden waters to the surface, creating veins of metal and deposits of precious obsidian. This was the irresistible package deal offered by the restless earth. A community was not choosing between a safe harbor and a sacred site, or between fertile land and a strategic pass. At these potent locations, they could have it all. The fault line was a bundled subscription to survival and significance, where every practical need and spiritual aspiration could be met in one dramatic, dangerous setting. Think of it as an ancient form of zoning. The ideal city plot required specific features: fresh water, building materials, agricultural land, natural defenses, and a connection to the divine. On stable, quiet plains, you might find one or two of these. You could dig a well, but you would have to build your own fortifications from scratch. You could find good soil, but perhaps no stone for walls. You would have to trade heavily for resources you lacked, but along an active geological boundary, nature had done the zoning for you. The planet itself had pre-packaged the essentials. The cliffs were the walls, the spring was the water main, the mineral veins were the industrial district, the trembling ground was the cathedral. This was turnkey urban development on a planetary scale. The cost was a terrifying and unpredictable maintenance fee, the ever-present risk of total loss. But for our ancestors, the upfront benefits were so overwhelming, so comprehensive, that the gamble felt not just reasonable but necessary. To settle elsewhere was to choose a life of scarcity and vulnerability. To settle here was to accept a thrilling, perilous abundance. This holistic perspective changes the very question we have been asking. It is not, why would they build somewhere so dangerous? It becomes, how could they afford not to? When every factor for civilization building is concentrated in one place by geological forces, the danger is transformed from a deal breaker into a severe term of service. The city on the fault was not a desperate gamble, but a calculated investment in a complete societal toolkit. It allowed for a density of population, a complexity of culture, and a concentration of power that simply could not be sustained in more stable but more limited environments. The spiritual dimension then acted as the ultimate social glue, binding the community to the place, framing the shared risk as a sacred duty. The practical and the profound were not in conflict, they were two sides of the same seismic coin. The earth provided the means, and the mythology provided the meaning, creating a feedback loop of resilience. This is the interwoven tapestry, a pattern where the thread of faith cannot be separated from the thread of fortification, where the strand of commerce is braided with the strand of cosmology. To see only one color is to miss the magnificent, terrifying picture. Our journey across these trembling foundations reveals a profound truth. Civilization was not built in spite of chaos, but in a daring and continuous dialogue with it. From the sacred springs of Delphi to the fertile slopes of Vesuvius, our ancestors looked upon the Earth's restless boundaries and saw not merely peril, but an overwhelming concentration of possibility. It was a source of life-giving water, of unimaginable mineral wealth, of impenetrable natural defense, and of direct communion with the divine. They did not simply endure these landscapes. They mastered them through a breathtaking fusion of pragmatic ingenuity and deep spiritual reverence. Their story is a masterclass in resilience, a testament to the human capacity to adapt, to innovate, and to find profound advantage in the heart of adversity. They teach us that the greatest security often lies not in avoiding risk, but in learning its language, in building structures and societies that can bend without breaking. Today, we inhabit a world still shaped by these ancient choices. Our own glittering megacities rise from many of the same volatile grounds, bound by the same gravitational pull of history, economics, and community. Their legacy is not a relic but a mirror. It challenges us to look beneath our steel and glass and remember the raw power that sleeps below. It asks us to balance our remarkable engineering with a humble respect, to listen to the whispers of the earth with both our seismographs and our wisdom. This enduring partnership, this gamble on the edge, is one of humanity's oldest and most defining stories. If this exploration of our geological dialogue resonated with you, consider subscribing for more journeys into history's deepest mysteries. We would love to hear your thoughts. Which ancient city's story of resilience on the restless earth spoke to you most? Share your reflections in the comments